Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talkies and Tomes, where we talk about movies, books, and everything in between. Or as I've started calling them, the most important of the least important things. I'm Richard, and thank you for joining what is hopefully the first in a longer series called And the Nominees Were. Where we'll be focusing on a year of the Best Picture nominees for an Oscar, talking through the movies, and just thinking about the year in context and if those movies are still good, however long afterwards in retrospect. Or as I'm calling it in long form, I'm watching every single Best Picture nominee for an Oscar, so you don't have to. So please, if you enjoy this, leave us a like, comment your thoughts on the movies, and subscribe for future episodes. In this edition, we're looking at the 72nd Academy Awards, movies nominated for the year 1999. So let's party like it's 1999. The 72nd Academy Awards find us on the 26th of March, 2000. We're at the Shrine Auditorium in LA, and Billy Crystal's our host. Bill Clinton is still the US President. Tony Blair is the Prime Minister here in the UK. We're right between the releases of Harry Potter's Prisoner of Azkaban and The Goblet of Fire. We have, as a world, just survived the terror of the Millennium Bug. And at the minute, we're grooving to the smooth sound of Santana and Rob Thomas. Or maybe we're dancing to Destiny's Child, Say My Name. In the US, gas is around $1.52 a gallon. In the UK, 72 pence a litre for petrol. On TV, we've just been introduced to a big yellow absorbent man who is a sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea. And HBO is starting to lead the evolution of TV shows with The Sopranos, The West Wing. It's a great time to be watching TV. We're also just in the middle of the 6th season of Friends. Later in the year, we'll see the debut of Dora the Explorer, Big Brother USA, the original CSI, MTV's Cribs, Jackass, and the Gilmore Girls. And soon we'll be sadly seeing the end of the original run of Boy Meets World, and also Kenan and Kel. Needless to say, this feels like a huge cultural nexus point. So let's get out those printed pages and MapQuest and let's drive through this year's nominations. So without further ado, we're going to welcome Clint Eastwood to the stage, and what we're going to do is go through a quick spoiler-free thoughts on the nominees. Cider House Rules. A dramatic period piece. It's kind of a coming of age. It's kind of a rom-com. It's definitely, period drama. It's a movie that tries to say a lot about a lot of difficult topics. It talks about abortion. It shows adultery. It shows incest. It shows the life of orphans. And it tries to get through these commentaries, but it doesn't really end up saying a lot. But I will say that the movie is saved by some wonderful performances. It's got the wonderful Michael Caine. It's got Tobey Maguire doing a really good job in the lead role. And I think Charlize Theron as the main female character is really strong as well. I've rated it 2.5 out of 5 stars, not the strongest of starts. The next nominee we have is The Green Mile, adaptation of the Stephen King book that brought out only a couple of years previously. Tom Hanks leads this really emotional movie. It's a long movie, it clocks in close to 3 hours. And it fills that 3 hours with a lot of silences and it's a slow movie. But it's purposeful, and I quite like that it doesn't rush. The movie follows Tom Hanks as the lead guard on a death row facility known as the Green Mile. And one inmate in particular potentially has some supernatural powers, and it follows the story of as they all learn about those powers and what those powers mean. A lot of different personalities are in there. It's really interesting. Like I say, maybe a bit long, but a really fun movie that makes you feel, and by the end, you're in tears. I've rated this movie 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have The Insider. The movie stars Russell Crowe as a whistleblower for the tobacco industry. Al Pacino plays the producer of the 60 Minutes TV show. And what follows is the tobacco industry trying to stop what Russell Crowe's character wants to get out into the world and stop Al Pacino's character showing it on TV. And it just goes to show the extent that the tobacco industry would go to ensure that their interests were being held up rather than the truth. If you like movies like All the President's Men, or you like TV shows like The Newsroom, I think The Inside is still a really fun movie. I enjoy those movies and TV shows. I enjoy The West Wing. It's in my wheelhouse. I rated it a 4 out of 5. It's a movie that raises a lot of interesting questions. I think it fails to answer some of them, and that's maybe why I don't rate it as highly as some others out there. The next nominee was The Sixth Sense. Everybody knows this movie for the twist, and on a rewatch, I actually found that it's a really beautiful movie, and it's quite subtle in many ways. It's quite a quiet movie. It leans into the creepier side as it goes towards horror rather than thriller, but I think it treads that line brilliantly. Some wonderful performances from a very young Haley Joel Osment and Toni Collette in there. A great movie, 4 out of 5 rating again. I'd recommend going to watch it. And the final nominee is American Beauty, the story of a middle-aged man in suburbia having a midlife crisis and the fallout from that and how it affects him, his family, and his neighbours. A commentary on the American dream, a commentary on life as it's changed in America. It's kind of a lot of things, but it's not one thing. It's a great movie. It's got layers. The score is great. The cinematography is great. It gets a little bit of a bad rap nowadays, but that's only because what has happened in the world since, and we're looking at it with a different perspective. And there is also the problem of Kevin Spacey and the allegations against him, which I'll speak of further later. I rated this 4.5 out of 5. Having watched this movie again for the first time in years, I thought it was still up there as a wonderful piece of cinema. Before we get into the deep dive of all these nominees, I want to get into some of the other movies that were released in 1999 that weren't nominated for the Best Picture, and there's a couple in there that I think maybe should have. It was Toy Story 2, The Mummy, Disney's Tarzan, Notting Hill, Being John Malkovich, Man on the Moon, Boys Don't Cry, Star Wars Episode 1, and The Matrix are all movies that came out in 1999 and weren't nominated for this Oscar. So I'm going to keep those in mind as I think about the movies, and we'll reflect on 99 as a whole when we get to the end. So the first movie that was nominated that we'll do the deep dive on is Cider House Rules. Cider House Rules sees us following Homer, played by Tobey Maguire. He is an orphan at an orphanage in the northeast, kind of the main area of the US. The orphanage is run by Dr. Larch, played by the absolutely wonderful Michael Caine, and we find that Homer, as the older orphan there, he's in his late teens, early 20s. He helps Dr. Larch perform medical procedures, including abortions. Now, abortions, as we know, is a difficult subject in the US, and at this time were illegal. In addition to this, Homer is the older sibling to all of the other orphans at the orphanage. But obviously, the only visitors they get are either women who are coming for abortions or families that are looking to adopt a child. Dr. Larch is planning on having Homer replace him eventually at the head of the orphanage. Issue being, Homer has never been to high school, let alone medical school, and Homer himself doesn't like the idea of the abortions. He's anti-abortion. Now, Dr. Larch is not just the director and the doctor, he is a father figure to the children there. And it's really famously, he puts the children to bed every night saying,
"Good night, you princes of Maine, you kings of New England."
And despite this desire of Homer to stay and be that bigger brother, he also wants to go out and see more of the world. He's only lived in the orphanage. At this point, a young couple arrives, and they're not there to adopt one of the children. They're there to have an abortion. They are an unmarried couple. This couple of Candy, played by Charlize Theron, and Wally, played by Paul Rudd, want to have the abortion because Wally is only on home because he is, at the time, based overseas in the Pacific Theatre of War because we're in the midst of World War II. And the only reason that Homer isn't overseas is that Dr. Larch faked some medical records that says that he was not fit for medical service or for armed services during the war. As thanks for performing the abortion, Candy and Wally offer to have Homer come and stay at Wally's family's estate, which is fairly nearby, but is a apple orchard that produces apples for cider, etc. Homer goes ostensibly to keep Candy a little bit company while Wally's going to be overseas, but also to do some work on the farm, on the orchard. While there, Wally gets to know the migrant workers who come and pick the apples. This is the kind of leader of the group, Arthur Rose, his daughter, Rose Rose. There's the affable Peaches and the ornery Jack. They spend the season together getting to know each other and come to really appreciate Homer, and he's quite a gentle soul. But in addition to this, in the absence of Wally, Candy and Homer begin an affair. Sometime later, the migrant workers have left and they've come back around for the second season, and Rose is pregnant, and we find out that actually it's because she has been raped and impregnated by her father, Arthur. Now, Homer sets aside his beliefs, his scruples, whatever you want to call them, and for the benefit of Rose, helps her and performs an abortion. And once Rose is recovered, she decides to leave. However, on leaving, Arthur tries to say goodbye, and Rose stabs him. The rest of the group find Arthur bleeding, and rather than allowing them to help him and allowing Homer to stitch him up, he decides to further inflict the wound and kill himself. Everybody realizing who Arthur really is and what he did to Rose. After this, Wally returns from the Pacific Theatre a paraplegic. He's been injured. He was a pilot. He's been injured in an accident. And Candy decides that she needs to stay with him. She needs to care for him and can no longer retain a relationship with Homer as well. Homer's obviously clearly upset, but at the same time, he is told that Dr. Larch has passed away he had an addiction to ether and accidentally overdosed. Homer returns to the orphanage, finding out that in his absence, Larch has faked his high school diploma and his medical school diploma and has convinced the board of directors for the orphanage to have Homer now be the director of the orphanage. And the movie ends with Homer as the director of the orphanage. All of the orphans are happy, and he's putting them to bed, and he says, "Good night, you princes of Maine, you kings of New England." Now, I like to be positive about movies where I can, and the positives are the acting in this. I think Tobey Maguire is great. Michael Caine is wonderful as Dr. Larch, and Charlize Theron doesn't have a huge amount to do, but when she's on screen, she glows. She's wonderful. Additionally, we have Eric Pursullivan, that you probably know as Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle, and a young Kieran Culkin as some of the orphans, and they're really great in their roles too. The cinematography is wonderful. It's really warm. It's got those sepia tones. It makes one nostalgic for simpler times. It's got that feel of it being a different time to the modern world, and it's really, really well put together. So I think, again, coming back, I think you have to praise the director Lasse Hallström for that, and I think you have to praise Rachel Portman, who was the leader of the score and the writer of the score, as just absolutely wonderful pieces of cinema. But the movie's let down by the plot and the story. Something I like is that it does try to raise questions about abortion, adoption, the standards around them at the time. It raises the issue of incest was going on, and class differences, and what was happening with people going to war and adultery. And there's a lot of big themes in there. I never felt like any of these were resolved. They were kind of all washed away under the carpet. I mean, the resolution for the incest was that the daughter ran away, killing her father. And, Arthur Rose's death, almost, he was, the way that the speech went, it felt like it was almost heroic, or at least there was an honor to it. And I didn't feel that sits very well. And we get to the end of the movie, and Homer's there throughout the whole movie trying to be morally superior, and the world has, outside of his bubble that he's now seen, has made him realize that things aren't as black and white maybe as he thought they were when he lived in the orphanage. But then he gets back to the orphanage, and he is put into this position where he is to be the doctor in charge of the orphanage, and he knows full well that he's not been to medical school, and he just accepts it and carries on anyway. And I think that's why I gave it the 2.5 out of 5. I think without the wonderful performances, it'd have been closer to a 1 or a 1.5 star, because it feels like there's no repercussions in the storyline for people. There's no real storyline that has a real ending, and I found that very frustrating by the end of the movie. Next nominee we have is The Green Mile, an adaptation of a Stephen King book that was released in the mid-90s. It's a Frank Darabont movie. It's got a lot of similar feels to his other great movie from the mid-90s, The Shawshank Redemption. It's another movie set in the early 1900s in a prison. There's a lot of similar themes there, and you can see there's a lot of parallels in how the movies are built. In the movie, we're in 1935. We have Tom Hanks as Paul Edgecombe, the lead guard on the Green Mile, the death row of a correctional facility in Louisiana. We see him leading this group of guards, including one of them who is there through nepotism because he is the nephew of the state governor. His name is Percy, and love that character. He's a horrible character, but played really, really well. And amongst the inmates is John Coffey, played by the late Michael Clarke Duncan. So John Coffey is a large, powerful man, but he's quite simple, and he's there for murdering 2 young girls. We first see that John Coffey is different when he resurrects or heals the pet mouse, Mr. Jingles.
Mr. Jingles. That his name?
Of one of the other inmates who has been stepped on by Percy. Trying to understand what is going on with John, Tom Hanks' Officer Balcom decides to, with the other guards, except for Percy, decides to break John out to go to the warden's house because the warden's wife is terminally ill with cancer. On returning to the prison after successfully healing the warden's wife, John expels this dark energy that he has taken in, the badness of the cancer that he's taken in, puts it into Percy, who goes into a trance and ends up killing one of the other inmates who is absolutely off his trolley, the absolute psychopath, Wild Bill. And after killing Wild Bill, Percy is then taken away. He's catatonic. He leaves. Just an interesting character circle there. Following this, we find John is getting closer and closer to being executed, and he has an encounter with Paul where he puts his memories into Paul's head. We find that, yes, John was found cradling the young girls' bodies, but actually it was Wild Bill, the prisoner, which was killed by Percy, who was the one who had murdered the young children. After this, Paul tries to do something, but it's too late. John will be killed for the crimes that he did not commit. Officer Balcom offers John one final chance to escape, and John chooses not to, saying that he doesn't want to live in a world where there's so many evil and bad things can happen. And as one final action, he cures Paul of an ongoing bladder issue that's been stopping him from peeing throughout the movie at times. It's been an on-running piece of story that you weren't quite sure where it was going to go. John cures him, but there is a side effect to this. Now we fast forward from 1935 to 1999, and the narrator of this story, you find out, is an older Paul, still alive and still very active in 1999, and the audience is another old lady called Elaine, who doesn't believe that Paul could be the age that he claims to be, which would be over 100. So Paul then actually shows her the mouse. Mr. Jingles is still alive as well. And Paul says, if Mr. Jingles is still alive, don't know how long I'm going to live. And he then goes on further, and Elaine gets older and passes away, and he's still going. And he gets to the point where Elaine had said to him, isn't it a miracle that John Coffey gave you this long length of life? And Paul says he doesn't think it's a miracle, it's a good thing. He thinks it's a punishment for not saving John, that he has had to see all of his loved ones pass away. And he just keeps going, and he doesn't know when his life will end. A great movie. As I said earlier, I rate this 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's got so many great performances. I'm a big fan of The Shawshank Redemption, and, it's got a lot of the same feels with having the same director. And I think because of The Shawshank Redemption, Frank Darabont, as director, was given a lot of leeway with this movie, and it's not a fast-paced movie. It's a slow movie, and there's a lot of pregnant pauses. It's a lot of meandering, and I get why people wouldn't enjoy that. And there are times when I've watched it, I've watched it a handful of times over the years. There's time when I watch it going, this movie could be a little bit shorter. And I do want to pull out some of the wonderful performances in there. So you have Michael Clarke Duncan as John Coffey. He's gentle, he's powerful. You can see why people are scared of him, but you just want to root for him, and you feel so sorry for him. Tom Hanks is Tom Hanks in the movie. He plays the main prison officer, but you know what you're getting with Tom Hanks. He's playing that slow, subtle, really strong character there. And I like Tom Hanks, but I know he's not for everybody. But this was Tom Hanks at the peak of his 90s powers. I've already mentioned the character Percy. I love that character. Doug Hutchison really should be praised for his portrayal. He's slimy. He's a toad. He's horrible. He's cruel. And he's just so different to the other prison guards who are all, fairly normal family men just doing their jobs. And he's just a slime ball, but he's played so well by Doug Hutchison. And, I love that performance. And the character makes the movie for me. He's one of the reasons that the movie's so good. And finally, Sam Rockwell as well, Bill. He plays this psychopathic character. He's the guy who is the complete antithesis to the Michael Clarke Duncan character. And I love that. I think that was wonderful. And I think Sam's performance as him is wonderful. Like, he hams it up a bit, but he gives 100% in every scene he's in, and I love that. It's a movie that makes you feel, and it's all the bits of it. The scores there, the cinematography is wonderful. It's got the kind of the cold colours where it needs to in the prison, but then there's warmth at times. Again, I mentioned it during the Cider House Rules. It's got that kind of nostalgic sepia tones to it. It's just a really well-made movie. On the bad side, the other side of the Darabont coin is sometimes it's a long movie, it's self-indulgent. He could move things along quicker, but he's, almost kind of like you kind of sat there going, and it's just getting to the point where you need it to. It's, the nature of the story, it being a Stephen King story, when he does throw in the supernatural, does it lose some of the message, and it could lose some of the viewers who are not into that? I think it does a little bit, but I think there's a lot of good message behind it, that it's subtle enough that it doesn't take over the movie. And there's been some criticism I've seen, and I can understand it, of the character of John Coffey, this large African-American gentleman, is a bit of a caricature. But even if it is a caricature, I don't want to take away anything from Michael Clarke Duncan's portrayal of John Coffey. I think he's wonderful. It could have been different, yes, but I think it's hard to sometimes build a character that's easy to relate to without there being some caricaturism there. As I said, a 4 out of 5 movie. I think it's wonderful. And, over a quarter of a century later, I watched it again, and I thought it was a wonderful piece of cinema. The third nominee is The Insider, starring Russell Crowe as Dr. Jeffrey Wigand. It's based on a true story where Dr. Wigand used to work for a large tobacco company, and upon leaving the company, he was asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. At the same time, we see Al Pacino as Lyle Bergman, Now, Al Pacino's working for CBS as a producer, particularly for Mike Wallace, and we see that he has come to Dr. Wygand to get some technical information for another story, kind of almost put into layman's terms and kind of ensure that it makes sense. So, fact checking, but also breaking it down so it can be reported to the people. At this point, Wygand says, well, I can't talk about my past. That gets Bergman interested. He starts a little bit of digging. B&W, not BMW, B&W, the tobacco company that Dr. Wygand used to work for, start not liking this big news producer sniffing around and starts going harder on Dr. Wygand, trying to sign another, even more severe confidentiality agreement, and generally just be a little bit threatening. Now, this pisses off Wygand. He goes to Bergman. Bergman now is interested why are B&W going in so hard on to not have Wygand talk about what he knows. But Bergman realizes that Wygand can't speak about what he wants to speak about because there's a legal risk to both Wygand and to CBS. However, if Wygand was to talk as a witness in an ongoing legal case, that would be public record, and that could be something that CBS and Wygand could work with. We see Bergman going to a prosecutor in the state of Mississippi who are in the process of litigating the tobacco companies, because they want a witness in that case saying that the tobacco companies have lied and it's affecting the health of the people of Mississippi. The B&W lawyers going hard on him. Outside of that, he's getting more and more threatened. His family getting threatened he can't get jobs that he wants to, getting serious. And at this point, he has the interview for CBS recorded, just so once everything is out there in public, it can be released as soon as possible. And we find out actually the thing that he knew is that the tobacco companies, the CEOs had all been deposed, saying they didn't know certain things that they did know. And one of those things is where Dr. Wygand came in, which was Dr. Wygand had been asked to add more addictive additives to the cigarettes of B&W. He was the chief scientist and he refused. And B&W's CEO had Dr. Wygand fired because, well, that would mean that the B&W may be making less money. Well, we had the tobacco CEOs publicly saying that they were not adding these or intentionally adding further addictive substances to cigarettes. At this point, the leadership at CBS, which is about to be bought by Westinghouse, and their legal counsel ask Mike Wallace and Bergman to stop with this line of questioning because it's not in the interest of CBS as a whole. Al Pacino's Bergman at this point decides that he doesn't like this. It's journalistic integrity is being affected by the corporate needs of the company, and he doesn't like that. At the same time, Bergman finds out that there is a 500-page dossier that the tobacco company has created, which is there to discredit and smear Dr. Wygand, that's been given to the Wall Street Journal. He calls the Wall Street Journal and manages to get them hold off from releasing this as a news story. Wygand is struggling, Bergman is struggling to get to the bottom of everything. And what he decides to do is release his story that CBS decided not to release the whole of the Wygand interview because of this corporate interest. And he goes to the New York Times with this, and the New York Times puts it on the front page, giving a scathing report on CBS and their journalistic integrity. At the same time, the Wall Street Journal discredits this 500-page dossier that they've been given by Big Tobacco, saying that it is not worth the paper it's written on, and it's just a smear campaign against Wygand to try and discredit him because they fear what he knows. And not only do they say this is just character assassination, they then print the deposition of Dr. Wygand in the Mississippi case. This means that in the end, 60 Minutes puts out the whole interview with Wygand and Mike Wallace. Dr. Wygand is now vindicated. He's got what he needs out of this, and the truth is out there, and he's the world has lifted the weight off his shoulders. And Bergman, and he thanks Bergman in the end. They become friends for life, as this actually happened in real life. And Bergman decides to leave CBS because of the bad taste that the episode left in his mouth. So the good, it's full of great actors, it's full of great performances. Russell Crowe as Dr. Wygand is just wonderful. I think he just does a great job of becoming paranoid, but also having a backbone about him and having principles. And I really enjoyed his performance. Al Pacino is Al Pacino. He goes from quiet and down here to then he's yelling at the camera and at the other people, and it's the two extremes. Either you can't hear what Al Pacino's doing, and then he starts yelling at everybody. And the yelling parts are excellent. But, I think he does a great job in what he does. But then, outside of that intensity, you have some wonderful performances. You have Christopher Plummer plays Mike Wallace, does a great job there. You have Michael Gambon, or Dumbledore, as so many people know him, the late wonderful Sir Michael, plays the B&W CEO, and he's quite insidious. Yeah, he's quite devilish, shall we say. And you've got a plethora of great actors in there, and well-known faces, from Rip Torn to Breckin Meyer. There's Gina Gershon, there's Debbie Mazar, there's Colin Feeve, there's Bruce McGill, and Philip Baker Hall does a really great job as well, playing one of the CBS execs. And I like a movie that asks big questions. I like, I was a fan of All the President's Men. I like things like The Newsroom, West Wing, those Aaron Sorkin kind of movies. So, I like something that is, real life, big story. And I think, you can tell it's got great direction. It's got Michael Mann as the director. Michael Mann worked with Pacino before on Heat. He also did Ali with Will Smith. He did Collateral. A really good director, and you can tell it's got great direction throughout the movie. And as I said, if you like All the President's Men, you like Spotlight, you like that kind of movie, Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo, for example, definitely recommend watching The Insider. I think it's a really, really strong movie. The bad, it clocks in quite long. It's almost 2 hours, 40 minutes long. You sometimes sat there going, wonder where this movie's going. It's got, a little bit in the middle where the pacing and the plot just kind of goes a little bit amiss. And I found, despite the long run time, it focused so much on Wygand and Bergman that actually I think some of the big messaging was lost. So you focus so much on the character and assassination of Wygand and what's going on there, and then you're not focusing on the fact that CEOs were adding more things to cigarettes, that they lied to the US public and to the US Congress, that there was this ongoing ongoing legal case in the Mississippi area. There's so much that I'm like, I wanted to know more of. Maybe from 1999 it wouldn't have happened. Nowadays maybe it would suit a mini series on TV. And I think that's probably why I don't score it more than 4 out of 5, is that I was feeling left a little bit empty on some of these. But yeah, like I say, if you like All the President's Men, you like Spotlight, go for it. I think this is a really good movie. And the next nominee, The Sixth Sense. I would say if you've never seen this movie, I would skip past this, because the twist is so important to the movie that if you don't know what the twist is, watch it first. So those of you that are still with me, we're first meeting child psychologist Malcolm Crowe. We're in the home of Malcolm and his wife Anna. They've just gotten home from an evening celebrating Malcolm and giving him an award for his career as a child psychologist and the great work that he's done. What they don't know is in the house there is an intruder. Now, this intruder is an adult, Vincent, but we find out very quickly that when he was a child, he was a patient of Malcolm's, and he is still sick, and unfortunately, he's so sick that he pulls out a gun, shoots Malcolm, and then shoots himself in the head. And we have then the scene of Malcolm having been shot somewhere in the gut area, laying on the bed, and Anna trying to help him and save him and calling 911. We then jump to sometime just about a year later or more, and Malcolm's now analysing another child called Cole. Now, Cole reminds him in many ways of Vincent, and Malcolm starts to see Cole as a way of vindicating himself, of solving the problems with Vincent through helping Cole. Since we last seen Malcolm, his relationship with his wife appears much more cold and distant, and it appears that he's been working since being shot as a way of recovering. At the same time, we meet Lynn, Cole's mother, and she's really worried about Cole and what's going on, as she can see that he has the signs of physical abuse as well. He has marks on his body. Cole is bullied by his classmates, but he's still invited to one of their birthdays, and at that birthday, he is locked in a closet by some of the bullies, and he has an absolute panic attack. He screams the house down, and he comes out of the cupboard covered in further bruising and marks, and it looks like he's been attacked in the cupboard. At this point, and this is part of the twist, Cole tells Malcolm that he can see dead people, but those dead people don't know that they're dead.
I see dead people.
At this point, Malcolm's a bit disbelieving, but he kind of goes on and he's trying to go through his notes, look at what happened with Vincent, and he's listening to an old audio tape of Vincent and his work. And in that tape, you hear Malcolm leave the room, and Vincent's left in the room, but then you hear very quietly another voice in the room with Vincent. This leads to Malcolm believing Cole that he can communicate with dead people, with ghosts, but he then asks Cole to change his attitude. So rather than being afraid of these people, maybe he can help them, and maybe that's a way of overcoming the problems that Cole has. Cole takes his advice and communicates with a young girl, and with Malcolm goes to the young girl's wake, at which point he finds a VHS, which he gives to the grieving father. On watching the VHS, you find out that it had been her mother had poisoned her, and which had eventually, unfortunately, led to the young girl's death, and had also already begun poisoning the young girl's younger sister. Thus, Cole saves the life of the younger sister. Following this, Cole suggests to Malcolm that maybe he should communicate with his wife while she's sleeping. Maybe she'll listen to him then. And then Cole tells his mother, Lynn, about his gift. And Lynn doesn't believe at first until Cole says something very specific about his dead grandmother, Lynn's mother, which makes Lynn realize that Cole is telling the truth. At this point, we see Malcolm pouring his heart out to his wife, who is sleeping on the couch in their home. And as he tells her how much he loves her and how sorry that he is, he sees her drop a ring on the floor, and it turns out it's his wedding ring that he's no longer wearing. And then all of a sudden, he realizes Cole can speak to the dead. He is dead. He goes back, touching his wound or where he was shot, and he works out that he died that time after being shot. And his wife is not cold and distant from him. She's just mourning his death. And he speaks to her further and gives her reassurance, and she seems to relax and seems to be more comfortable with the death of Malcolm. At this point, Malcolm has done what he came back to do as a ghost, and it releases him. The twist. The twist is absolutely wonderful. It's foreshadowed. The moment that Cole says he sees dead people, he can talk to them. It's foreshadowed, and you still don't realise that Bruce Willis is dead. There are hints, and if you've ever watched it and then watched it back, you start to realise that Bruce Willis doesn't interact. Nobody interacts with Bruce. Well, Bruce Willis tries to interact with people, or his character does after that first scene, but they never seem to really give him an answer back. Their lack of response is sometimes appropriate for that. But then you kind of go back and see, like, oh yeah, like Cole's mother never did speak to him in scenes they were together, and his wife never really spoke to him. She just kind of seemed to be cold and walk off. Really, really well made. And what I will say is the whole movie is incredibly well made. I think it's M. Night Shyamalan for loving a great twist and a great psychological story and having his horror elements. He doesn't listen to the devil on his shoulder, is what I'll say, or doesn't listen to it as much. And that there are a few jump scares, but he actually is patient, and the movie's very quiet, and it draws you in. You edge closer and closer to the screen throughout the movie. The score is very bare piano sounds. I think it's wonderful, and I didn't appreciate until I rewatched it recently that it was such a well-made movie, and we focus so much on the twist and the fact that it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie, and that's what he does. That actually, I think we didn't realize, or at least I didn't realize, how well made this movie is. And again, some of the performances are really great in this movie. Haley Joel Osment at the time, really, really young actor, and he is wonderful in every scene he's in. You really feel for the kid. And Toni Collette as his mother, Lynn, just love her. I think she's a wonderful actress, and every time I see her on the screen, I feel like it's a privilege, and it is in this. And Bruce Willis, he's does so well playing that role of he's in the scene, but he doesn't interact with anybody but that little child. But at the same time, he doesn't acknowledge that the other people around him aren't interacting with him. Really clever, really good performance. And it's so sad to see what he has become in 2026. Bad. I mean, it's a little OTT and stumbles into its own earnestness at times. And there are moments where, as I said, and like Shyamalan's worst instincts, that devil on his shoulder comes in, a couple of jump scares, which I didn't really feel were necessary in terms of some of the ghosts. And there's a moment where a few people hanging from the ceiling of the school, which had been a courthouse previously, and where there'd been hangings done, and you see the hanging bodies, and I'm like, okay, we get it, they're dead. It just took me out of the moment and the feel of the movie. And the bad is, I want to focus on the bad is the flip of the good. Like, I feel bad that this movie, everything about it is the focus on the twist and that bit of the story, rather than it actually just being a great movie. And I think that's maybe just because of the back catalogue and what we've seen before and seen since from M. Night Shyamalan. And the final nominee and the winner of the award in 1999 was An American Beauty. Now, before we get into it, I'm actually going to focus on some of the bad, and that is Kevin Spacey. I think it's hard to remove the artist and the art. And it's difficult with Kevin Spacey because the allegations against him were from 2017 onwards have been pretty serious, and I believe Anthony Rapp and I believe the other people. But there's also been legal cases which, he has been found not guilty, one in America, one in the UK. And I tried to be objective in that, and I think if the rest of this review, I'm not going to bring it up, I'm going to be objective. Kevin Spacey, beforehand I thought it was a good actor. Like, he still is a very good actor. You can see that. But there are, I do have some discomfort watching him in movies, and I decided to watch this one for this watch through. But I think there are going to be other movies I may not watch for be them a Kevin Spacey, or there may be somebody else as we go through the series that I feel uncomfortable with. And I think that's it. I think it's a personal choice every time. So I hope, if you don't want to listen to me talk about American Beauty anymore, skip it. And I'm not going to recommend you watch it if you don't feel comfortable watching a Kevin Spacey movie. And I think it's important that we listen to victims, we hear their stories, and we believe them. But as I say, with that in mind, I wanted to talk about the elephant in the room. I chose this time to watch the Kevin Spacey movie. I might not next time. Now back to our movie. American Beauty, directed by Sam Mendes. I actually think is a really beautiful film, and we'll get into some retrospective on it once I get further past the plot. But the plot follows Lester Burnham, played by Kevin Spacey, a middle-aged man, married, father of one teenage daughter. He's a media executive, and he's miserable in life. He's on paper he follows the American dream. He lives in a big house, good job, lovely family. He just he feels marginalized in his own home though, and he just feels like he's not living anymore. It's a commentary on his and maybe others who may be feeling at the time they were living in an American bubble, an American suburban hell, an American jail of their own making. Now, his wife, Carolyn, played by the wonderful Annette Bening, she is a realtor, and she is kind of a bit obsessed with status and with putting out that front of being a wonderful family and her being a great wife and him having a lovely job and them having that lovely daughter. She's obsessed with that status. Their daughter Jane, played by Thora Birch, she's high school senior age, but she's got a lot of doubts, a lot of insecurities, and her best friend is almost a bit opposite of her. She's quite mousy, if you're going to use a bit of a Britishism, lacks self-confidence. Her best friend Angela, cheerleader, claims to be sexually active and experienced, beautiful, that kind of stereotypical blonde high school American girl. Moving in next door, you have Frank Fitz. He's a retired Marine colonel. They have his catatonic, or virtually catatonic wife, Barbara, and their son. Their son, Ricky, is a teenager, is a similar age to Jane. He has an interest in filming things and seeing the beauty in the world around him. And he does that, and he maintains a collection of tapes of everything that he's filmed. And to fund this and his lifestyle, he has a job, which is actually a front for his drug selling business. He sells marijuana. And he manages to do this despite living in the strict house under Frank. And we first see Frank's true nature when a gay couple who live in the neighborhood, they welcome the Fitz family, and Frank is incredibly derogatory and homophobic about this gay couple. Now, while this is going on, Lester's becoming infatuated with Jane's best friend Angela. His infatuation goes into him having daydreams about her and fantasies about her. And we get the famous rose petal montage, which is, a great visual from this movie, really colourful and sexual and sensual without being OTT, which I actually quite enjoyed for a movie from 1999 where things could be quite overt. And, we have Lester frustrated with his job, him doing this. At the same time, we have Carolyn. She's frustrated with the marriage. It's not just a one-sided thing. And she starts a affair with a fellow realtor, the king, Buddy King. At this point, Lester quits his job, or he's let go from his job, but he managed to blackmail his supervisor into quite an impressive severance package. He takes a job as a fry cook at a local fast food restaurant and buys his dream car, a 1970s Pontiac. And we also see him start to work out more, as Angela has hinted that she might be interested in him if he was a bit more in shape. And he also begins smoking weed, which he gets from Ricky. Now, Angela and Lester's flirting leads to Jane having an argument, understandably, with Angela, and that drives her into the arms of Ricky. Angela doesn't like Ricky, thinks he's a weirdo, but there's a kinship between Jane and Ricky. They start a relationship, a teenage relationship. And one day, Lester's working the drive-through at his new job. Who comes through the drive-through? But it's Buddy and Carolyn, and he discovers their relationship. And Buddy, not wanting the scandal, decides to break it off. And Carolyn is incredibly frustrated and goes and buys a gun and hides it in the marital bedroom. The next thing we get to is Frank's found a recording in Ricky's collection of Lester working out. Lester was working out either in the nude or the nearly nude, and Frank therefore thinks that Ricky is homosexual and beats him up for it, and pretty much throws him out the house. And Ricky then, as he's leaving, walks into an argument that Lester and Jane are having regarding Lester's flirting with Angela, and Ricky asks Jane to run away with him. Frank approaches Lester. He's obviously really upset with what's happened with his son Ricky, and they have a bit of a heart-to-heart, and it ends up with Frank thinking that Lester's also gay, kind of in being comforted, goes in for a kiss. Actually, Lester's really gentle and rebuffs him, but it doesn't make a scene of it. At this point, we also see an upset Angela having fallen out with Jane. Frank goes to comfort her, and it starts getting physical between them. And as Frank and Angela start to take it further, she states that, oh, this is my first time. And Frank realizes the bravado that Angela has been putting out there, and becomes almost like a father to her instead, and comforts her, and stops what's going on, and starts to realize what's going on, in that he's comforted Frank, he's comforted Angela. Actually, there's more beauty in life, and that not everybody around him have these perfect things, and everybody has their problems, and everybody hides behind their lives, their veneers, their costumes. As he figures this out, Lester's in his house. He sees a picture of himself, Caroline, and Jane, and smiles, realizing how lucky he is. But at this moment, we see a gun behind him, a figure behind him, and Lester is executed, pretty much in the back of the head. Now, Ricky and Jane then find his body. There's blood everywhere. And then we find out that Frank is covered in blood and there's a gun missing from his collection. Caroline finds out about Lester's death and she falls to pieces. She goes into his closet and falls to pieces, hugging and crying into his clothing. And the movie ends with Lester narrating over the videos of these, saying how lucky he actually was and how he found peace in the end, and that there is beauty in the world and you just don't see it every day. I love this movie. I gave it like 4.5 stars out of 5. It's layers. It's been studied extensively, this movie, and I think it is good, and it's I want to say it's clever. It's in your face. It's obvious. There's bits of it are obvious. There's bits of it that are over the top. I don't think that's a problem. I think movies sometimes don't need to be subtle and can show and not tell. And I think it's Sam Mendes' work here is wonderful. There's juxtapositions and things where you don't expect it. You have this wonderful set piece of suburbia there. It's beautiful homes with these lovely lawns and lovely decor and all of it. But then he somehow managed to feel like hell, like it's the worst place, despite the fact it is almost the epitome of the American dream. And the cinematography is, absolutely wonderful. From, I spoke about the fantasy scene with the rose petal motif. There's the scene with the bag blowing in the wind that has been parodied, hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of times. Yeah, there's the shots where you can have warmth in suburbia in one moment and then isolation the next. The scene where you see Kevin Spacey's reflection in a monitor and it looks like he's in jail. It's all very clever, but it's not subtle at times, subtle at others. It's a complicated movie with complicated themes and complicated imagery. It's good. It makes you want to go back and watch it and pick out other pieces again. I think what makes it great is it's just a high performance overall package. It's a great score. It's a great direction, as I've said, from Sam Mendes, and great performances. I think Annette Bening's wonderful in it. Kevin Spacey, despite the elephant in the room, his performance is great. I think Thora Birch and Mena Suvari are great. I don't think there's anybody who has a bad turn in this movie. Now the bad. I've spoken about the elephant in the room. And there is also the white male privilege of Kevin Spacey's character is there for all to see. And I get it. But you also have Annette Bening's white female privilege there, and it is a focus of, despite the fact that they, it focuses on Kevin Spacey's Lester Burnham more. You could have had it focused equally on his wife, and both of them as husband and wife are miserable in that marriage. So I think you could equally had it from Carolyn's perspective, and maybe that would be interesting. And I think it's an unfortunate kind of timing of it coming out in 1999. This is only 2 years before we'd have had 9/11. It's 10 years before the financial crash, and I think nowadays people would sit there and say, he sat there with a great job and a great family. He should be thankful for what he's got, rather than focus on what he's not got. And I understand that perspective as well, and I've seen that criticism. I kind of ignored that. I took the movie for what it was and for the time that it came out. And I think, as I've watched a lot of the movies, and hopefully we'll discuss throughout the series, I think sometimes you have to watch movies with context of the time that they're in. Otherwise, if you hold everything to modern standards, and this is a movie 25 years ago, if you held everything to modern standards, there'd be a struggle with a lot of things. And I think it's easy to see why this movie's become a punching bag for that reason, and for the fact that it's got Kevin Spacey in the lead role. I think it makes it easier for criticisms to be out there without people willing to shout up about it. And what I'll say is I understand the criticisms, and I don't think people are wrong. My perspective is I really enjoyed the movie. And I think in summary, I want to say that American Beauty, it was a hard movie to love, but I love it, but I appreciate the people that don't. So, reflections on our 1999 Best Picture Oscar nominees. Out of the 5, I'm happy American Beauty won. I think for me, it's the best movie of the 5. Do I think all 5 deserve to be there? No. I think it's obvious that I didn't think the Side House Rules should have been there. I'm happy that people got nominated for their performances in that movie. I just think as an overall Best Picture, it shouldn't have been anywhere near the other 4. And I think that year, 1999, as I mentioned earlier, there were some other strong movies. The fact that The Matrix, which kind of defined cinema at that period for action movies and sci-fi movies, was ignored for the Best Picture, I found a bit difficult. But equally, Being John Malkovich came out that year, and that's a great movie, and was probably critically one of the most acclaimed movies without being nominated for the Best Picture Oscar. And when I was doing some reflection, it's you can see modern criticisms of the movie industry very male focused. Every single one of these movies was about a man. You have Side House Rules, which focuses on Tobey Maguire's Homer. You have The Green Mile, which focuses on Michael Clarke Duncan's John Coffey. Insider is focused on Lowell Bergman and Jeffrey Wigand. You have a young boy, Cole, and Bruce Willis, who are the focuses of The Sixth Sense. You have American Beauty, where you have the wife, you have the daughter, but it is Lester Bergman as the man of the house who is the focus. It'd been nice to have seen some women in the focus, and 1999 had those movies as well. So not only do we have The Matrix and Being John Malkovich, but we had Boys Don't Cry, wonderful movie with Hilary Swank in the lead role, and Girl Interrupted, which I think could have been nominated as well. So I'm glad that we're doing better now, 25 years later. Toni Collette in The Sixth Sense brought that movie together for me, and Annette Bening in American Beauty you feel her pain, she's funny, you feel her despair, she's great. So all in all, 1999, great year for movies, great year for nominees, and I'm happy to say that you probably should watch at least 4 out of the 5 movies that year. So that's who the nominees were for 1999. From Talkies and Tomes, I'm Richard. Thank you so much for watching this. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and I'll get more of these released. And let me know your thoughts on the movies in the comments.